Alright, we're looking at the engine side of the transmission, and as we come in close here, look right in between the seal and this main shaft. And I apologize for the wiggle, but there's a little pin right there, and you can see the other one right there. Those are the two pins that you need to line up with the pins on your torque converter. On those two pins right there, those two slots need to go over those two pins. And I remember the very first one of these I ever tried, I didn't realize I didn't have it seated. It clunked a couple times. I thought it was in as far as it would go. And when I went to bolt it down, the housing, the bell housing, would not seat up against the engine. And I was really frustrated, only to find out that what I had done was I had attached the torque converter to the flywheel first and then slid them together. And that does not work, unfortunately. So what you need to do is you need to first get the torque converter onto the transmission, make sure everything's engaged properly, or otherwise it just doesn't work, and it's probably going to leak, and above all, it just doesn't work. And then once that's in, then you put the bell housing to the engine, and then you attach the torque converter to the flex plate, and I'll show you how to do that when we get there. So let's get set up and get that torque converter on. Okay, this is pretty straightforward. You just pick this up, slide it onto the shaft, and it's going to clunk a few times. There it goes. That's it, all the way in, and you should be able to feel it, some resistance, because you're completely in against those two pins, and you're good to go at that point. Now we're ready to mate the transmission to the engine. Okay, so I'm ready to mount the transmission to the engine. What I like to do, you want to have one or the other static and have the other one movable. So I've got the transmission set up on blocks. It's nice and stable. It's not going to go anywhere. I'm trying to shake it. I don't even know if you can see that. It's shaking just a little bit, but it's very, very stable. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lower the engine down, and you see this little pin sticking out right here, and there's a matching one over on the driver's side of the engine. Right, there we go, right there. And then if you look on the transmission down here, right there is a hole. And all we're going to do is we're just lower the engine down until those two are aligned, slide it together, and we're ready to go. And that's all there is to it. So next thing I got to do is lower the engine down. Alright, so I've lowered down the engine, and you can see that the pin right here is almost lined up with the hole. The engine is on the chains, and it's hanging ever so slightly sideways. So all I've got to do is just bring that over. I can just line that right up. Slides right in. I'll go over, I'll hold that side. Line up the other side by hand as well. You can see now that the whole thing is ready to seat. So all I need to do, put my bolts in, get those bad boys started, and we'll be in high cotton. Yes, sir. And we just tighten those down. Again, like I tend to do for a lot of things, I'm just going to snug it up first. The lift and the blocks are holding all the weight. All I'm doing is just bring them together. Before I tighten anything down completely, I want to put the rest of the bolts in. And that's all there is to it. Now we just got to tighten the rest of those bolts and completely attach the bell housing. And usually that includes bringing the starter into position over here. The starter will slide in over there. But all I got to do is bring those bolts in, tighten it all down, and then we'll be ready to attach the torque converter to the flex plate. Okay, so the engine and transmission are put together, and you can see I like grade 8 bolts, and I use them for a lot of things that seem very important. And speaking of grade 8 bolts, right here in my hot little hand, that is a grade 8 bolt. And this right here is a grade 8 locking nut. And you can tell by those little indentations right here. And so those are what we're going to use on the flywheel, or excuse me, the flex plate to the torque converter. That's what they're made for. And I haven't put the starter on yet because I want you to be able to see what's going on down here. So you can see our flex plate, and you can see the hole there. And what you need to do is you need to rotate the torque converter until the hole lines up. And then all you do is just hold your locking nut right behind that hole. Bring your grade 8 in. Take the time to line those bad boys up and get them started. And then you're going to torque it down. Now I'm going to break my rule here, and I'm actually going to torque those all the way down. And the reason for that is very simple, which is that you're going to have to rotate this flex plate, and that means you're turning the crank, and that's a real bear. So you want to get this all tightened down first time around. So go ahead and crank those down, and then you just rotate the flex plate and get them all three done. And that's all there is to it. You can